Right now, you are bored. Maybe just a little. Maybe a lot. Maybe you picked up your phone and started scrolling before you even realized you were doing it. Maybe you opened a tab you've already closed twice today. Maybe you're watching this video precisely because some quiet, restless part of you didn't know what else to do with itself. That feeling, that low hum of boredom, feels like a modern problem. A symptom of too many notifications, too many choices, not enough meaning. But what if boredom is one of the oldest things about you? What if the real answer to why you get bored is far stranger, far older, and far more important than you ever imagined? Your ancestors were bored. Not occasionally, not in the way you are when your Wi-Fi cuts out. Deeply, structurally, profoundly bored for hundreds of thousands of years. And what they did with that boredom changed the entire course of human history. Let's go back, way back. About 300,000 years ago, you are a Homo sapiens living somewhere in what is now East Africa. Your day has a rhythm. Wake before dawn, find water, hunt or gather food, eat, tend to injuries, watch for predators, sleep. That is most of it. The work is hard, but it is also finite. Anthropologists estimate that hunter-gatherer bands spent somewhere between 3 and 5 hours per day on what you could call survival tasks, 3 to 5 hours. After that, there was time. Long, unstructured, open time with no screen to fill it. This was not unusual. This was Tuesday. Psychologist Sandy Mann at the University of Central Lancashire has spent years studying boredom and argues that it is not simply an absence of stimulation. It is a signal, a cognitive pressure that builds when your mind is underused, pushing you to seek something more meaningful. Your brain, Mann argues, does not tolerate emptiness well. It starts searching. It starts wandering. And that wandering is not a bug in the human operating system. It is the feature that built civilization. Think about what your ancestors did with those long, quiet hours. They did not stare at nothing. They talked. They told stories. They picked up stones and scratched marks into cave walls. They watched the stars long enough to notice that those stars moved in patterns. They pressed their hands into wet clay and fired it in flame and made something that did not need to exist. They solved problems that had no immediate survival value simply because their restless minds could not stop moving. Boredom was the first engine of creativity. Researchers at the University of Virginia ran a study in 2014 that became famous for how uncomfortable its results were. Participants were placed in a plain room with nothing to do for between 6 and 15 minutes. Absolutely nothing. No phone, no book, no music, just sitting. The researchers then gave participants the option to press a button that would give them a mild electric shock. A shock most of them had already tried once and described as unpleasant. 2/3 of men chose to shock themselves rather than sit quietly with their own thoughts. One man shocked himself 190 times in 15 minutes. Your brain would rather feel pain than nothing. That tells you something. That tells you that the pressure of an unoccupied mind is so intense, so biologically ancient, that it overrides even the preference for physical comfort. Your ancestors felt that same pressure. They just did not have a button. So they made one. They carved, they painted. In caves across Europe, Africa, and Southeast Asia, archaeologists have found images that are tens of thousands of years old. A pig in Sulawesi, Indonesia, painted at least 45,500 years ago. Geometric patterns in South Africa's Blombos Cave scratched into ochre 73,000 years ago. Handprints, animals, spirals, human figures. Images made by people who had no word for art, no concept of museums, no audience in mind. They made things because their minds demanded it. Because boredom pushed them to the edge of the possible, and they jumped. Archaeologist Francesco De Rico at the University of Bordeaux has argued for decades that what separates Homo sapiens from every earlier human species is not brain size alone. It is behavioral modernity, the emergence of symbolic thinking, planning, creativity. And the evidence for that modernity always shows up in the objects people made when they did not have to make anything at all. Beads carved from shells, pigment mixed with purpose, instruments made from bone that could only have been used to make music. Music! Think about that. Someone, tens of thousands of years ago, had enough free time and enough restless mental energy to sit down and figure out that you could blow air through a hollow bone and control the pitch by covering holes with your fingers, and then they practiced, and then they played for other people. And something happened in those other people. Something resonant and social and profoundly human. They were not bored anymore. This is the paradox at the heart of boredom. It feels like emptiness, but it is actually pressure. It feels like a problem to escape, but it is actually a doorway. The psychologist John Eastwood at York University calls it a failure of desire, a state where you want to want something but cannot find it. And in that gap, in that restless searching, the human mind has historically produced its most extraordinary things. Your ancestors did not only create during boredom, they also thought. They planned. They ran simulations of the future inside their heads. When there was no immediate task, the default mode network of the human brain, a system identified by neuroscientist Marcus Reichel at Washington University in the 1990s, switched on. This network is not inactive when you are idle. It is running some of the most complex cognitive processes your brain is capable of. Self-reflection, theory of mind, the ability to model what other people are thinking, moral reasoning, planning across long-time horizons, imagining things that do not yet exist. The default mode network is what runs when you stare out a window and your mind drifts. And for most of human history, that drift was the main event. Here is what your ancient ancestors were likely doing in those long, unstructured hours. They were gossiping, not trivially, but socially, building maps of their group's relationships and trust hierarchies. Evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar at Oxford has argued that language itself may have evolved primarily as a form of social grooming, a way of maintaining bonds in groups too large for physical touch alone. They were lying in the grass watching clouds and noticing that one cloud today looked like the same kind of cloud that came before the last rainstorm. They were slowly, painstakingly building models of the world. They were learning without a teacher. And here is the part that should make you stop. Every tool you use today traces back through an unbroken chain of invention to a moment when someone, somewhere, had nothing to do and let their mind wander in a direction it had never been before. Agriculture, the wheel, the written word, mathematics, all of it began with boredom. All of it began with a mind that refused to sit quietly with nothing. The problem is what has changed. Modern boredom is structurally different from ancient boredom. Your ancestors had quiet. Long, unbroken, uncomfortable quiet that their minds had no choice but to push through. You have infinite interruption. The moment that restless pressure starts to build, before the default mode network can fully activate, before the mind can begin to wander in the productive sense, there is an alert, a notification, a video that starts playing. The gap gets filled instantly, from the outside before the inside can do anything with it. You never have to sit in the discomfort, and that might be costing you more than you know. Psychologist Manoush Zomorodi explored this idea in her book Bored and Brilliant, tracking people who deliberately went without their phones and found that their creativity, their problem-solving, and their sense of meaning reliably increased. Not because phones are evil, because the discomfort of doing nothing, the pressure of an idle mind, is not a problem to be solved. It is a signal to be followed. Your ancestors followed it all the way to cave paintings, to music, to language, to fire shaped into metal, to ships that crossed oceans nobody had proved were crossable. So the next time you are bored, the next time you reach for your phone without thinking, or open the same app for the 4th time in an hour, try something. Try waiting. Sit in it. Let the pressure build. Let your mind look for something. Because somewhere, deep in the same brain that has not changed much since those long African afternoons, the default mode network is warming up. It is asking, what if? It is asking, what else? It is doing exactly what it was always built to do. You are bored right now. And for 300,000 years, that was the beginning of everything.